Hello, today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. I'm Joe Schmidt with TC2, and this is Staying Connected. Last Wednesday, my fellow TC2 project director Tony Mangino and I chaired a panel at Enterprise Connect where we gave an update on SIP trunking. What we're going to do today is give you a quick summary of that session because there have been many developments at SIP trunking that benefit the enterprise. Now, if you don't know Enterprise Connect, it's a long-running annual conference where industry experts lead discussions on the latest systems, software, services, and applications for enterprise communications and collaboration. As I mentioned, our session covered SIP trunking, where we, along with the panelists, gave an update on the state of SIP trunking globally. Okay, Tony, thanks for joining me. So what did you think of our session?
Thanks, Joe. Well, I was very pleased with the turnout for an 8 a.m. session, that's for sure. I felt that the panelists were very engaged and anxious to talk about what their companies are doing with SIP trunking. Panelists included some known leaders in the SIP trunking arena, including from AT&T, Nora Chesby-Peskin, from Verizon, Derek Curl. We had a U.S.-centric supplier on the panel in Comcast and Jeanette Romero. And finally, we had a niche supplier that provides service outside of the U.S. in Tata Communications with Mary Friel. I think the four panelists were able to provide a well-understood and varied perspective of the SIP trunking market.
Yeah, I was also pleased with the turnout. Now, we've chaired a panel on SIP trunking at Enterprise Connect for, many years. It was a nascent network technology when we chaired our first panel, and we spent the majority of our time explaining how SIP trunking worked. And today, even though SIP trunking is an established service, it's clearly something that companies want to hear about. I like Enterprise Connect because it allows the audience to hear firsthand from the service providers what they're doing with SIP trunking, where they're making their investments, and how they're enhancing their service offerings, while they're also willing to take questions from the audience. Tony, why don't you highlight some of the things that the service providers talked about?
Sure, Joe. Some of the things I noted were, first from Comcast. As I mentioned before, they are a domestic player here in the U.S. with great network capillarity and a resilient design. Comcast did describe a pricing construct that is a bit different than what we see from other Tier 1 providers. Tata, they're a global provider with full PSTN replacement in over 25 countries, and noteworthy is that they're continuing to build out SIP service and facilities in additional countries around the world. They are also a major player in the North American market, providing direct-to-enterprise service. Now, both Verizon and AT&T touted their global capabilities and penetration in the large enterprise space. Specifically, Verizon plugged their SIP trunking on-demand capabilities, while AT&T discussed their push into the integration of cloud services with their SIP product.
Thanks. That's a good summary. Let me just add that we also asked the suppliers a number of questions about how companies quantify savings by moving to SIP trunking. And they all agreed that companies should expect savings of 30% or more, depending on many factors like where they're starting, the design they go with, and the number of legacy PRI and POTS lines that they remove. And that's a key point. You actually have to disconnect the legacy circuits to realize the savings in your business case. The service providers, they also agreed with us that savings are often the driver for moving to SIP trunking, but once SIP trunking is up and running, many companies do take advantage of the services and features that you just mentioned. In particular, I'm anxious to see how the SIP trunking integration with UC, cloud, and on-demand solutions develops over time.
Yeah, I agree. It was also interesting that there were several other service providers in attendance for the session. They came up to us after the session was over to make sure that we at TC2 knew who they were and to tell us that they too have SIP trunking services available for the enterprise.
I think that's a good thing. More suppliers offering services like SIP trunking, that creates a more competitive market, it drives down costs, and it does foster innovation. All of the things that enterprises should want. Before we close out here, let me remind everyone that LB3 and TC2 will be running a half-day conference in Atlanta on May 14th, where Tony, along with many of our colleagues, will be sharing our knowledge and experience to help you deliver innovation and cost savings to your company through network service deals. So if you would like to learn more about that conference, or if you have questions about SIP trunking, or if you just generally have other ICT lifecycle needs, you can contact Tony, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues by giving us a call or dropping us an email. You can also stay current by checking out our websites or follow us on LinkedIn.